Hi everyone, welcome back to another statistics video. I'll be showing you how to calculate the chi-square test statistic in Excel for this one. So, um, there's a couple of formulas you can use. So, one way is, well, before we can even start, there's a couple of things we gotta do to set up. One thing is we gotta find the row sums and the column sums for the information that's given. So we'll do that first. Totals here. Okay, so that's those are all my totals. Now there's a formula you can use. It's called the chi-square test. It's here. So the thing about this particular function is it'll return the p-value for your information. But before we can use that, we need to find the expected values. So to find the expected values, what you would do is for the particular value you're working on, you would have to multiply its row sum to its column sum and then divide by the entire total. So here's what I mean by that. So say I wanted to find the expected value for this guy right here. So I will take its row sum, which is this value, multiply that by its column sum, and then divide by the entire total, which is this right here. All right? And I have to do that for each of these values. Okay, so if I wanted to do it for this one right here, I would do its row sum multiplied by its column sum, so it's in this column, so now it's this value, and then divide that by the total. Okay, and I will do that for each value that I have in my table here. Okay, so I know there's that little black box in the bottom right corner, but you just want to be sure that you don't mess up the values because they can move around. Okay, so now that I got my expected values there, I can use the chi-square test that I mentioned earlier. So double click on that. So you can see it asks for both of these things. So the actual range will be the original data that we had worked with. So just those four there. I'll hit comma, and it's asking for the expected values here. That's these guys. All right, and that's it. Just hit enter, and that is the p-value. Now to get the chi-square test statistic, what we'll need to do is we'll need to do the chi-square inverse. And here's the thing to remember too, for chi-squared, it's always a right skewed distribution. Okay, so this p-value is the p-value in the right tail. So to find the test statistic, we'll have to do the inverse of the right tail. It's this one right here. Okay, so the p-value, this is what it's asking for, is this guy right here, comma, the degrees of freedom. So to find the degrees of freedom, what you'll do is you take the number of columns, subtract 1, and then multiply that to the number of rows minus 1. So here I got 2 columns, I got 2 rows, 2 minus 1 times 2 minus 1, 1 times 1, which is 1. And I'll hit enter, and that is my chi-square test statistic there. And if you need more decimal places, just go ahead and increase the places, like so. Okay, so now let's say technology is not working for you. You're having a hard time getting these functions to work. Well, good news is there's a formula you can use. Bad news is there's a formula you can use. So this right here is the formula. So this is chi-squared, looks like a giant X like I mentioned. Okay, so this is the Greek letter sigma, which in math means sum of. Okay, so what we'll be doing with this formula is we'll be taking the square of the difference of the observed and the expected values, dividing that square by the expected value for each of these, and then adding them all up. Okay, so we'll do that all at once. So doing this particular formula will give us the chi-square value. Okay, so this is where parentheses becomes important. Let's go in order. Take the first first actual value, subtract the first expected value, or the expected value that's associated with that actual value, parentheses, square that, and divide it by its expected value. And I'll do that for each one. So I'm going to add that to the next one. Square that, divide it by its expected value, and I'll just keep doing this over and over again for each one until I got all of them done. Okay, so that's all of my values there. I'll hit enter, and that's my chi-square value. So as you can see, it's the same one that I got here using that formula function. Now to get the p-value, we'll use the chi-square dist function. But remember what I mentioned earlier, chi-square distributions are right-tailed. So we're actually using the chi-square distribution RT. So chi-square dist RT. Okay, so this is the test statistic, the x, comma, degrees of freedom, we'll do it the same way. Number of columns minus 1 times number of rows minus 1. And enter. And that's the p-value, which matches what we got here using that chi-square test function. Okay, guys, well, that's pretty much it. You got the short way and the long way. You got the long way in case the short way doesn't work out for you, but it's a good way to check. Especially for these, you do want to make sure that you do have the right formulas down and it's giving you the right information. Okay, guys, well, thanks for checking out my video, and stay tuned for my next one.